What is Art? By Leo Tolstoy. Chapter 9. The unbelief of the upper classes of the European world had this result. The activity of art had once aimed at carrying the highest feelings that mankind had reached, the feelings that flow from religious consciousness. In its place came an activity aimed at giving the greatest pleasure to a certain society of people. And out of the whole vast field of art, one part was fenced off and given the name of art, the part that gives pleasure to people of a certain circle. Set aside for a moment what this cost European society in moral terms. One piece was cut out of the whole field of art, and something that did not deserve the name was recognized as the important art. Even so, this perversion weakened art itself and brought it almost to ruin. The first consequence was that art lost the religious content proper to it, a content endlessly varied and deep. The second was that art, having only a small circle of people in view, lost its beauty of form and became affected and unclear. And the third, the chief one, was that art stopped being sincere. It became contrived and calculated. The first consequence, the impoverishment of content, came about because a true work of art is only one that carries feelings which are new, feelings people have not experienced before. A work of thought is a work of thought only when it carries new considerations and new thoughts, and does not repeat what is already known. In the same way, a work of art is a work of art only when it brings a new feeling into the daily round of human life, however slight that feeling may be. That is why works of art strike children and young people so powerfully when they carry to them, for the first time, feelings they have not yet lived through. A feeling that is entirely new, one that no one has expressed before, acts just as powerfully on grown people. And this is the very source that the art of the upper classes cut itself off from, by measuring feelings not against religious consciousness, but by the degree of pleasure they give. Nothing is older or more worn out than pleasure, and nothing is newer than the feelings that arise from the religious consciousness of a given age. It cannot be otherwise. A man's pleasure has a limit, set for him by his nature, but the forward movement of mankind, the very thing that religious consciousness expresses, has no limit. At every step forward that mankind takes, and these steps are taken through an ever clearer understanding of religious consciousness, people live through feelings that are new and newer still. And so only on the ground of religious consciousness, which shows the highest degree of understanding of life reached by the people of a given period, can new feelings arise, feelings people have not yet experienced. From the religious consciousness of the ancient Greek, there flowed feelings that were truly new, truly important, endlessly varied for the Greeks, and Homer and the tragedians expressed them. The same was true of the Jew who had reached the religious consciousness of one God. From that consciousness flowed all the new and important feelings the prophets expressed. The same was true of the man of the Middle Ages, who believed in the community of the church and in the hierarchy of heaven. And the same is true of the man of our own time, who has taken into himself the religious consciousness of true Christianity, the consciousness of the brotherhood of man. The variety of feelings flowing from religious consciousness is endless, and all of them are new, because religious consciousness is nothing other than the sign of a new relation between man and the world, a relation now coming into being. The feelings that flow from the desire for pleasure, on the other hand, are not only limited, they were tasted and expressed long, long ago. And so the unbelief of the upper European classes led them to an art of the poorest possible content. The content of upper-class art grew poorer still for another reason. Having stopped being religious, art also stopped belonging to the people. And this narrowed the range of feelings it carried even further. For the range of feelings lived through by those who rule, who are rich, who know nothing of the labor that keeps life going, is far smaller, poorer, and more trivial than the range of feelings natural to working people. People of our circle, our aestheticians, usually think and say the opposite. I remember the writer Goncharov, a clever and educated man, but a townsman through and through, an aesthetician. He told me that after Turgenev's sketches from a hunter's album, there was nothing left to write about the life of the people. It had all been used up. The life of working people seemed to him so simple that after Turgenev's peasant stories, there was nothing more to describe there. The life of rich people, with its love affairs and its dissatisfaction with itself, seemed to him full of endless content. One hero kisses his lady on the palm, another on the elbow, a third somewhere else again. One man pines from idleness, another because he is not loved, and it seemed to Goncharov that in this field the variety had no end. This opinion, that the life of working people is poor in content, while our life, the life of idle people, is full of interest, is shared by very many in our circle. Consider the life of a working man. It holds endlessly varied forms of labor, and the dangers that go with them at sea and underground. It holds his travels, his dealings with masters, with foremen, with his fellows, with men of other faiths and other nations. It holds his struggle with nature and with wild animals, and his bond with the animals of his household. It holds his work in the forest, on the steppe, in the field, in the orchard, in the vegetable garden. It holds his relations with his wife and children, who are not only near and dear to him, but are also his fellow workers, his helpers, the ones who take his place at the work. It holds his relation to every economic question, which for him is not a matter of clever talk or vanity, but a question of life for himself and his family. It holds his pride in standing on his own feet and in serving others, and it holds the pleasures of his rest. And all these concerns are shot through with a religious attitude towards them. To us who have none of these concerns and no religious understanding at all, that life looks monotonous. We compare it with the small pleasures and trivial worries of our own life, a life not of labor and not of making, but of using up and destroying what others have made for us. We think the feelings that people of our time and our circle experience are highly significant and highly varied. In truth, almost all the feelings of people in our circle come down to three, and they are very trivial and very simple. The feeling of pride, sexual lust, and the feeling of weariness with life. These three feelings and their branchings make up almost the whole content of the art of the rich classes. In the beginning, at the very moment when the exclusive art of the upper classes broke away from the art of the people, the chief content of art was the feeling of pride. So it was during the Renaissance and after it, when the chief subject of works of art was the praise of the powerful. Popes, kings, dukes, odes and madrigals were written in their honor, and cantatas and hymns. Their portraits were painted, and their statues molded, in every pose that could make them look greater than they were. Then the element of sexual lust entered art more and more, until today it has become a necessary condition of every work of art of the rich classes, with only the smallest exceptions, and in novels and plays with no exceptions at all. Later still, a third feeling joined those carried by the new art, and it too makes up part of the content of the art of the rich classes, the feeling of weariness with life. At the beginning of the present century, only exceptional men expressed this feeling: Byron, Leopardi, and later Heine. Of late it has become fashionable, and the most vulgar and ordinary people express it. The French critic Dumic is entirely right when he says that the chief character of the works of the new writers is this: weariness of living, contempt for the present age, longing for another time glimpsed through the illusion of art, a taste for paradox, a need to be singular, a yearning of over-refined people towards simplicity, a childish worship of the marvelous, a sickly lure of daydreams, a shaking of the nerves, and above all, an exasperated appeal to the senses. So he writes in his book, The Young Men, and indeed of these three feelings it is sensuality, the lowest of them, open not only to all people but to all animals, that makes up the chief subject of every work of art of recent times. From Boccaccio to Marcel Prévost, all the novels, poems, and verses carry, without fail, the feelings of sexual love in one form or another. Adultery is not merely the favorite theme of every novel, it is the only one. A show is not a show unless on some pretext or other, women appear on stage bared above or below. Songs and romances are all expressions of lust dressed up in poetry to one degree or another. Most of the paintings of French artists show the female body naked, in one form or another. In recent French literature there is hardly a page or a poem in which nakedness is not described, and in which the favorite word for it, the nude, is not dropped 2 or 3 times, whether it fits or not. There is a writer called Remy de Gourmont, who gets published and is thought to have talent. To get some idea of the new writers, I read his novel, The Horses of Diomedes. It is one long detailed account of the sexual encounters some gentlemen had with various women. There is not a page without descriptions meant to inflame lust. The same is true of Pierre Louise's book Aphrodite, which was a success, and of a book I came across recently, Huysmans's Certain Ones, which is supposed to be a criticism of painters. The same is true, with the rarest exceptions, of every French novel. These are all the works of people sick with erotic mania. Such people are plainly convinced that because their own whole life, thanks to their diseased condition, has narrowed down to the smearing about of sexual filth, the whole life of the world must be narrowed down to the same thing. And this is what the entire artistic world of Europe and America now imitates: people sick with erotic mania. And so, through the unbelief of the rich classes and the exclusiveness of their life, the art of those classes grew poor in content and came down to carrying three feelings: vanity, weariness with life, and above all, sexual lust.